The new iPad. 2 generations from the somewhat enigmatic but overwhelmingly successful debut, Apple's latest tablet is firing on all cylinders. No longer is there a question as to whether such a device has a place in people's day-to-day lives. It's now a question as to how many devices are necessary to have in one household. Indeed, the new iPad is about as mainstream gets, only a few years removed from the many pundits, well, including myself, questioning its viability. The truth is that maybe only a handful of people actually knew how insanely successful Apple's tablet would be. But now everyone but the most blinded of opposers is a believer. Even if you don't own an Apple device, you're compelled to give credit where credit is due. Nowhere does this ring truer than with Apple's 3rd generation efforts. The new iPad, as Apple so awkwardly calls it, is the defining moment in a technical empire. Outside of perhaps the next iPhone, the new iPad is Apple's magnum opus. Doubtlessly, they will top this effort with the device that has even better specs or even more innovative features. But this latest device is like 30-year-old scotch, meaning you probably know what to expect. It's nothing groundbreaking, but then again, you won't find anything smoother or more appeasing to the senses. Mr. Jobs would have been proud of his team's performance this go-around. Since you've likely already read about a dozen or so reviews for the new iPad already, I don't see any sense in making this another, conventional review. Since I'm much more comfortable behind the lens telling a story than behind a keyboard, I thought I'd present you with a different sort of review, something practical if you will. So let's start off with it. Let's start with LTE, one of my favorite new features. Next to the obvious Retina display, the LTE inclusion on the new iPad is the best new feature. In my opinion, it is what truly separates this iPad from previous iterations. True enough, the iPad has always had the option for wireless data, but it hasn't felt truly liberating until now. I selected an iPad with Verizon's 4G LTE primarily because AT&T doesn't have LTE in my region at the moment. The awesome thing about 4G when compared to previous 3G technology is that you perceive it to be just as fast as your Wi-Fi at home. It's true, from my experience there is no perceived difference between the two. It's like always being on your home Wi-Fi connection. That, folks, is truly liberating. LTE is more than just an overhyped buzzword. For the first time, it truly feels fast and surpasses expectations. Now on to our next feature, battery life. Once it was obvious that the new iPad would see both a Retina display, a faster processor, and 4G LTE, my next big concern turned to battery life. Surely, battery life would suffer, no? I should have known better. Apple is not one to make big compromises when it comes to battery life, and the new iPad is no exception. Even with 4G LTE enabled, I've received battery life similar to that of my Wi-Fi only iPad 2. It really is amazing that Apple was more or less able to maintain similar battery life when the device has been significantly improved in almost all areas. The fact that Apple decided to stay with their dual-core processor instead of opting for a quad-core processor undoubtedly went a long way to retaining battery life comparable to previous models. Bravo, Apple. Now onto the Retina display. For people who say that there is no big difference between the iPad 2's display and the 3rd generation iPad's display, you're either A, lying, B, have never seen it in person, C, you're blind, D, you're trolling, or E, this is most likely, all of the above. Folks, this is in the same vein as going from the iPhone 3GS to an iPhone 4. It's the exact same experience, maybe even more so. No one in their right mind would say that the 3GS's display is on par or about on par with that of the iPhone 4, and the same thing goes for the iPad 2 versus the new iPad. Whether or not a Retina display matters to you is of course a personal decision. I know many people that have seen the iPhone 4 have acknowledged its superiority, but who are still fine with using their 3GS. And that's all fine and dandy, but it's just silly to claim that the two are anywhere within the same ballpark. Personally, I think that the Retina display is reason enough alone to upgrade to the new iPad. The iPad and the iPad 2's lack of pixels causes me severe eye strain. Trying to read anything on the iPad 2 for an extended period of time was a guaranteed solution for a headache and dry eyes. I haven't experienced nearly the same amount of side effects with the new iPad. Games look way better, colors pop to surreal levels. It's just something that has to be seen with your own 2 eyes to understand how much of a difference it really makes. Now on to some miscellaneous details. The new iPad is pretty much perfection in a tablet. The original iPad broke ground. The iPad 2 was admittedly a bit of a disappointment. It was a mediocre upgrade, but this new iPad is perfection. Outside of any personal complaints with iOS itself, I honestly can't find any flaws with this tablet. It has the battery life, it has the high-speed connectivity, it has the amazing display, it has the horsepower to outperform most, if not all, current competitors. The bottom line: if you're going to get a new iPad, definitely get one with 4G connectivity and at least 32 gigabytes of space. Since all the apps have been Retina-ized, meaning every app that has been updated to take advantage of the new display takes up much more space than it did previously, 16 gigabytes isn't going to cut it unless you're among the most frugal of space takers. With my recommendations in mind, that makes the new iPad come in at about $729. True, that's very expensive, especially if you purchase an iPad 2 within the last year. But I recommend you sell your iPad 2 and whatever else you can find laying around the house and take a taste of Apple's finest offerings since the iPhone 4. You won't regret it, and I guarantee you that Apple's new iPad will still feel new even a year from now.